Radical.
Nintendo officially went on record a couple weeks ago denying the claims that 4K development kits have been sent out to 11 different developers. This is what Bloomberg was talking about online, the story that they were excited to break, that these dev kits, these 4K dev kits, were sent out to devs for a new 4K Switch. This is Nintendo's statement. News report on September 30th, 2021 falsely claims that Nintendo is supplying tools to drive game development for a Nintendo Switch with 4K support. To ensure correct understanding amongst our investors and customers, we want to clarify that this report is not true. We also want to restate that, as we announced in July, we have no plans for any new model other than the Nintendo Switch OLED model, which will launch on October 8, 2021. So there's, of course, Nintendo having to get that plug in there for the OLED model, which basically is a Nintendo Switch with a slightly bigger, brighter screen. You know, basically not a new model, just a refresh. A very Nintendo thing to do, you know? Now there's two camps here. There's one camp that believes that Nintendo actually is working on some new hardware, which makes sense. Companies are always in competition, working on new hardware. It's silly to think that the next, 4 or 5 years, all Nintendo is going to have on the market is the, Switch, when we're going to have like the Series X and the PlayStation 5, having 4K games, and I do believe that Nintendo is going to definitely work on a new hardware, whether it's going to be called the Switch. These companies are always working on new things. So this camp believes that, the Bloomberg report is correct and that they did give out to 11 companies, game companies, these dev kits because they're, getting things ramped up for an eventual release of a 4K console. And Nintendo is coming out to damage control, this one side believes, because they don't want to hurt the sales of the current new Switch, the OLED, because they want to sell a lot of that. They want to be a lot of buzz around that, understandably so. A hardware company doesn't release a new console, even if in this case it's just a refresh of the Switch. They don't release a new console and then throw water on that by saying, well, you know what, next year we're working on a Switch Pro. This is just like a little stopgap measure because we want to get something out there to sell. We want to throw something out there so people get excited and buy the new version, even though, there's a newer version coming out next year, and it's going to be 4K. A problem with a 4K handheld device is the current tech that's out there is not going to be able to, create something like that because of the battery drain. Okay? The current Switch doesn't have the best battery. So how in the hell do you think a 4K version is going to work? Where'd you going to get like an hour and a half of battery life? I just don't see that happening. And the other side actually believes in Nintendo because they're pointing out a lot of things that Bloomberg has reported in the past that is basically just not right. So the other side will say, listen, Nintendo is they're selling these Switches like crazy. There's no reason for them to even be working on a 4K device because they can create their simplistic games that don't have the best horsepower, the best graphics. They can keep creating those and selling them like crazy because they are Nintendo. And I do get that argument. Nintendo is in a position to where, like, besides Sony and Microsoft, they have the first party games where they do not have to try to rush to keep up with the tech. I mean, look at the successful Nintendo Wii. They didn't have to rush to keep up with the 360 and the PlayStation 3, and they still sold a lot of those consoles. So Nintendo could go either way here.